In a new measure to cushion the impact of petrol subsidy removal and rising food prices, the federal government has approved 5 billion naira for essential food supplies to each state and the FCT. The government made this known at the end of the National Economic Council meeting presided over by Vice President Kashim Shettima. Now, in what seems surprising, just wait for this, the relief granted to the states by the federal government is a loan. You heard right. What does this mean? Will the state governments be able to key into the initiative as Nigerians wait bitterly and earnestly for succor, as the relief seems to be a loan? Will the planned relief alleviate the current hardship plaguing the country? I'll be speaking with economists who will help make sense of all of that. I'm Sulaiman Alede, and this is Arise Prime Time. Well, not one, not two, but 5 billion naira. That's how much each state and the FCT will get to address the impact of petrol subsidy removal and rising food prices. The funds are to be distributed through a formula, with 52% as grants and 48% to be repaid to the Central Bank of Nigeria in installments. Additionally, the federal government has released 5 trucks of rice to each state governor. The National Economic Council took these decisions, and State House correspondent Adeswa Omora has more on this.
It is no longer news that it is not the best of times for Africa's largest economy, as it struggles to address the economic challenges stemming from the removal of petrol subsidies. Concerns have arisen over escalating costs of essential commodities and the need for macroeconomic stability in Nigeria. At this month's meeting, those concerns on rising costs of food and transportation dominate deliberations by the highest economic advisory body, chaired by the Vice President. Governor of Borno State, flanked by some of his other colleagues, reveals some of the decisions reached to alleviate immediate hardships on the people.
The federal government has approved the sum of 5 billion naira to be given to each state for the procurement of 100,000 bags of rice, 100,000 bags of rice, 40,000 bags of maize, and fertilizers. This funding has to be shared with a formula as follows. 52% of this money is given to states as grants, while 48% of the 5 billion naira is to be paid back on an installment basis within a period of 2 years, 20 months to the CBN by the states and the local government areas in Nigeria.
The issue of the social register, I would say that that is ongoing in terms of a review. End game is to reduce unemployment, get unemployed resources. Unemployed resources are not just idle hands, but also they raise the capacity utilization of industries, including the moribund ones, to be restructured.
In light of recent labor union protests, the council establishes a committee to engage with labor groups while urging calm among citizens. The council also acknowledges the repercussions of the volatile situation in Niger Republic, particularly for states along the border.
NEMA will also liaise with states to distribute foodstuffs to the people immediately, especially those that are affecting the frontline states that are bordering the Niger Republic because of influx of refugees. The council has also tasked the state to dialogue with the labor union's leadership.
The meeting also reviewed a presentation on assessing the nationwide impact of the 2022 floods. The committee's efforts faced setbacks in addressing the effects on people and infrastructure.
Only 16 out of the total number of affected states forwarded their submission to NEC Secretariat to date, as expected. About 15 others were yet to do so. The submission from defaulting states are being awaited as we speak.
Recognizing the interim nature of these measures, the Economic Council reaffirms its dedication to pursuing enduring solutions. Emphasis is placed on long-term strategies, especially in commercial and irrigated agriculture. The Council also highlights the $800 million loan's intention to assist Nigerians through accurate registration. Additionally, it welcomes the 500 billion naira package distribution announced by the President aimed at alleviating subsidy removal effects. Adesoa, Omorwan, Arise News.
Well, many thanks, Adesoa. Now let's have a conversation about the economy and all you've heard so far about the government's plans to provide succor for Nigerians. I have in the studio with me the policy strategist, political commentator and group CEO of the global investment and trade company, Baba Yusuf, and also the political economist, Adakole Ijogi. Gentlemen, good to see you both, and thanks for your time. These are times Nigerians would want to be, spoken to in a language that they best understand, and that's why I'm excited about both of you having come down to the studio so that we can break them in bits and pieces. Quickly here, let's start with you, Baba Yusuf. You've heard that's the NEC meeting, not the FEC meeting.
Yeah.
So we have all the governors all there, and they say 52% grant and 48% loan to be repaid instrumentally by the states. Listening to that report by Adesoa, what first struck you?
What first struck me, Suleiman, is that there is going to be huge challenges ahead, because to add to the numbers you give to dimension it further, the loan will be paid after 3 months moratorium over a period of 20 months. Of course, at 0% interest, as they said, but we already know the states, the financial state of the states already highly indebted. Although we know with the increase, with the removal of fuel subsidy, there is some increment in their subventions. But suffice it to say that they are already in the very far negative of all the indices. And then another thing to note is that there are some, what you call conditions. One of it is that this money will be used to buy 100,000 bags of rice and 40,000 bags of maize per state. I did a quick mental calculation of that, Suleiman. And if you look at it, averagely, a bag of rice is about 50 kg. So if you look at it from that perspective, you are having about what? 5 million kgs of rice per state. If you just take a rule of thumb and say you are giving 10 kg to the vulnerables, quote and unquote. So you are going to give 500,000 vulnerables. Fantastic. Now take the poorest state in Nigeria according to MBS, the Multidimensionally Poor Index, says Sokoto State, has the highest number of poor people, amounting to about 4.3 million Sokoto indigents or residents are poor. Now, just juxtapose it with the 500,000 people that will get this initial 10 kgs of rice, for example. It's less than 1% of the already multidimensionally poor, of the poorest state in Nigeria. Now, what came to my mind is this going to be a one-off? And if so, what are the other interventions that will come, for example, in the next 6 months? Given that the government has a robust plan, action plan, as a pathway to exit this vagaries of this removal of subsidy. Bearing in mind that IMF has told us that this year, our economic growth rate was supposed to be 3.1%. Of course, with this new catalytic impact of the economy, that may change. But the projection says by next year, it may even contract to 2.9%. Now, with this headwinds we are going into, I wonder how these initial steps will actually be, first of all, enough for the most vulnerable, 133 million, and the concept should be no one should be left behind. I wonder, first of all, the selection process. I hear His Excellency, Governor of Anambra State talking about the social register. I wonder how that will be done, how that will be captured vis-a-vis what MBS has already done. But the point is, we don't want to have an impression that some people will be left behind, because to be multidimensionally poor is to be at the bottom, of the pyramid. That being said, I'm still yet to hear clear pathways out of it, Suleiman, because this looks like one of those one-off knee-jerk things. But then I want the National Economic Forum to come out with a robust action plan, maybe 6 months, and then with milestones vis-a-vis the palliative. I'm also worried that we may end up with a palliative-driven economy running out of a subsidy-driven economy, Suleiman. The days are looking bleak. We need more clarity so that people will be able to have the hope that should be renewed.
Okay, let me bring Adakole here now. I caught you nod when he spoke about the state of the states, and that's one other aspect. And you don't want to give a loan, to a state or even individual who can't possibly pay out that loan. But again, let's start by talking about the state's actions in addition to what the federal government, is doing for the people.
Well, thank you for that question. Let me start by saying that while this economy, like I've always put it, is in dire straits, the Nigerian economy in the last 8 years has gone into 2 recessions. We've had policy challenges. If you remember, just a while back, we had issues with the recoloration of the naira. That also has its own economic effects on, the value of the currency, the economy, the hardship that Nigerians are going through. The removal of the so-called fuel subsidy had its own impact, being that petrol, PMS, is the live wire of the Nigerian economy, hence because we don't have other sources. But when you talk about governance and growing the Nigerian economy, I think that the federal government is having too much on its plate. If you take the state governments, for instance, like he pointed out correctly, most of these states, there are very few, even states like Lagos, they are indebted, heavily indebted. I think there are very few, maybe like Rivers or 1 or 2 states that are not borrowing from commercial banks. So the states live essentially from hand in mouth. I mean, I was privileged to be in the transition committee in Benue a couple of years ago, and I found the financials of Benue State very, very worrisome, because I chaired the subcommittee on the economy, sorry. I said to myself as at that time in 2019 that if you say Adakole Ijogi, come and be governor of Benue State, I would say no. Because you just couldn't see the books. You couldn't see any revenue, where the revenues are going to come from for development. So I think that what this administration is trying to do, which he pointed out correctly, aptly, that is looking like it's going to be palliative driven. I think that in their quest to wage war against poverty, it now looks like it's waging war against poor people. The war should be against poverty and not poor people. I think.
How is that?
Now, palliatives do not grow an economy. They are only buffers, social investment programs and stuff like that. They are okay, but they are just stopgaps. The real issue bedeviling the Nigerian economy are the fundamentals of the economy. We have said that severally, that one of the things that even gives some of us a ray of hope is the fact that a personality like Wale Edu is the Minister for Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy. He is a fantastic, first-class economist. I'm just hoping that he comes on board with real people, with ideas, with innovation, and then they go down to the real issues of proper planning, proper economic planning. I would have rather thought that for the states, we all know that these states are heavily indebted. Whether you give them 5 billion or 10 billion, some of these governors are actually not going to use these monies for these things, because as the money goes into the government coffers, the commercial banks or the banks pull out theirs. Yes, I'm telling you this, I can give you this from my experience in Benue State. I'm thinking that I was wishing 2 things after the removal of a fuel subsidy. 1, you subsidize production. You subsidize food production, fertilizer. You don't buy, how many civil servants do you have? You want to be buying buses? No, you subsidize food production, that is fertilizer. Then 2, I was hoping that government will buy back the debt of most of these states. Instead of giving these states funds, monies that you know might not actually get to the reason, down to the grassroots, that federal government will buy back these loans, these financial assets, buy it back from the state so as to free resources for the states. And then lastly, I was thinking that, you have, we run an economy where purchasing power has been diminished because of the value of the currency. And I think that just on the side that this government should pay critical attention to the value of the currency. All you see, the suffering that you have and the hardship, most of these things is because we have not paid critical attention to the value of the currency. Now I'm thinking about reflating local economies. Now there's something that some of us have been proposing to even the last government, that a G2G partnership, a government-to-government partnerships. You need federal government and local government partnership, federal government and state government partnerships. Now imagine, Suleiman, imagine that you spend 50 million naira in the 774 local government to reflate local economies as possible. It is when you don't have the purchasing power to purchase these commodities, these goods and services, Nigerians don't have, the naira has been worthless. I mean, even safer. Some backdoor currency in West Africa has even more value than the Nigerian naira. Because like I say, the previous administration created what we call economic contradictions. Nigeria has the largest economy in Africa, depending on whose figures you're looking at, $480 billion US. And yet the Nigerian naira is not in the top 10 currency in Africa. Is that not a contradiction? The naira is not in the top 10 currency in Africa. So we need to focus on the real issues, which is the fundamentals of the economy. Now that you have removed fuel subsidy, you had those naira scarcity or recoloration, you had those bad policy trusts in the last administration, we now need to focus on the real key issues, which is production, which is food production, which is manufacturing, which is agriculture, the value of the currency. We have to show up the naira. This 3 billion, I don't know where I can speak on that. This 3 billion naira that...
No, definitely. We'll come back to the 3 billion. But again, for clarity's sake, because you said the redesign of the naira also affected what Nigeria is dealing with at the moment.
Yes, the cash... You see, when you take a bad policy, it doesn't show up immediately. Those things that we're going through now is because of the naira scarcity that we had. Nigerians were queuing up. If you forget, people are breaking up the ATM system, dumping in banks. That naira scarcity that you have, I think that if we economists actually go down to the details, Nigeria lost billions of dollars because of that naira, with the recoloration of the naira and the scarcity that it created, because economic activities couldn't happen in the economy.
Well, let's come back to Baba Yusuf. Listening to Adakole Ijogi, he said, the war shouldn't be against the poor people. But again, if you listen to the president, you and I, we had that conversation when the president spoke, and we looked at those fine lines of what the president said. He also spoke about, subsidizing fertilizers, and just as you said. But the key things here will be the quick wins, the quick fixes. Doesn't this address that?
Thank you very much. I totally agree that to get out of the doldrum, we'll have to be in 3 phases. First phase is there must be quick wins, short to mid-term, shock absorbers, what I call shock absorber, on the populace, for the populace to withstand the vagaries, on the populace, on the economy. Then mid to long-term strategy moving forward, and all the economic interventions, talking about the fundamentals and all that. But before we get to that, the strategy should have inculcated a sustainable short-term action plan beyond just giving people bags of rice. So what happens to the oil and whatever you are using to cook the food? I give you an example. You
sound like a good cook.
Absolutely.
So you know the ingredients.
Even if you don't, Madam will ask you for that. I hear, for example, I know that the governors have their own plans and all that, but you see how they are struggling. The governor of Ekiti said, reeled out a plan to be crediting accounts of quote-unquote vulnerable people, 5,000 amounting to 10,000 households, and his state, according to statistics, showed that amount with 10,000 is less than 1% of the most vulnerable in his state. The multidimensionally poor index says about 1.3 million of his people are poor. So how do you first of all address that short-term intervention in this very micro way? Okay, and then with regards to other interventions to convert vehicles to CNG and all that, that is still talking about a layer slightly above the multidimensionally poor. Yeah. Those guys are in the hinterlands. Those people are in the urban areas. They don't even engage those layers to even survive. So I think there should be an expansion. I like the quick win concept, but I think it should be wider, more robust, and it should be more far-reaching. Like I mentioned earlier, if you look at the entire multidimensional index numbers and juxtapose it with these numbers we are seeing with regards to bag of rice and bag of corn, it's going to impact less than 1% of those. And I tell you, most likely, those multidimensionally poor will not even get it. Don't forget about what happened during the COVID-19 issue. Most of them will be used for political reasons to settle political party members. So at the end of the day, those people may not even get anything. I like, for example, what the governor of Yobe State said the other time when he started rolling out the palliative. I think that should, the Nigerian Governors Forum as a forum should come out with an overarching strategy. I know they have peculiarities, but they can have a template that will apply to all. For example, assessment of areas of intervention, identifying vulnerable persons, identifying the area of intervention, and how to ensure that it reaches those people. But then, these amounts we are seeing, appears to me people will be given bag of rice that will last them maybe 2 weeks, and then we have about 6 to 7 months of headwinds to face. The numbers are going to get worse. The issue of subsidy is going to be on the table for long, because as we inch towards the end of the year, the currency will still be going down against the dollar, you know, because we are getting towards the end of the year, towards Xmas and all that. Globally, the dollar increases. And then we also have the economic variables on the negative that are impacting. So we need to have a more holistic approach to deal with this issue of palliative over and above. And then what are the mid to long-term action plans to turn around this huge aircraft you are trying to turn around in the sky?
And turn it must.
Absolutely.
You know, listening to Baba Yusuf, one of the key concerns, I think, for Nigerians, you inclusive, listening to you, is about trust. How will it get to the people, and how do we identify the people? So we still have the issue of identification. We also have the issue of having a credible register of who the truly vulnerable Nigerian is, because how do we now address one of the key concerns you raised? Perhaps you must have sent money to someone and the person goes, oh, you shouldn't have sent it to this account because I'm owing the bank, and I go, you owing the bank, shouldn't you pay? So because you said if that money hits the state's accounts, the bankers will first take out what the states owe. So how do we, at the end of the day, address the situation? It then means that some of these states won't be getting 5 billion naira. Well, or will they be going through the back doors telling the federal government, please, could you send this to X account?
No, it has to go through the banking system. Well, I think that we, like I said, the federal government is actually biting too much, more than its fair share.
But I thought that's the problem. We're addressing the problem of the states now, because the states don't look good.
Look, if you go down to the grassroots, even the way political parties are organized, they are organized down to the ward level. The people know themselves. When you go to, that's why I say the government needs certain levels of partnerships. Federal government, G2G partnerships, government to government partnerships, the federal government to local government partnerships. When you have that, the local government chairman on councillors have different wards and different committees, so they know how to identify these people and how to distribute these materials. But Mr. Aledi, I will say this again, all those are just short interventions. The real issues is, what is the economic plan of this administration? Have they put together an economic team? Yes. Wale Edun is there coordinating. We want to see a blueprint. And that blueprint should spell how we're going to start growing the Nigerian economy. Because if you focus on palliative, I think it's just talk. The real issues are the real issues. The economy is bad. The Nigerian economy is in tatters. We need to hear a clear way on how to fix the economy, how to fix Naira. I want Uncle Wale to start saying things like, Dangote's refinery will soon come on stream, maybe by the end of the fourth quarter. Nigerian NNPC will sell crude to Dangote refinery in Naira. That will further strengthen the Naira and reduce the pressure on the US dollars. I want Uncle Wale to also say that 72 million liters that Dangote refinery is supposed to produce, Nigeria actually consume less than 50 million liters. The extra that you have will now be sold to these other African countries, like other West African countries, Togo, Benin, Chad, Cameroon, in Naira. That will further strengthen the Naira. I want Uncle Wale to start engaging the people, saying that, look, you know what? We're looking at this thing. We need to stabilize the Naira because businesses can't plan, businesses can't grow. How do we stabilize the Naira? How do we shore it up? Now, it is, you say you have floated it, that means it is demand and supply that fixes the price. Now, how do we shore this thing up? It's a simple thing. What is the demand side of it? Why do we have people paying house rents in Abuja and Lagos in US dollars? Why are people paying their school fees here in Abuja? I don't mention schools. The school fees here in Abuja and in Lagos and in Port Harcourt, they pay their fees in US dollars, in foreign currency. Why? So we need to find out the demand side of it and stop all that. And look, I like to put it out there here on national TV that do you know that it is a crime to spend anything outside of the central bank issued Naira within the Nigerian economy? The legal tender of Nigeria is Naira. This madness of the dollarization of the Nigerian economy, everything is depending on the dollar. I think this kind of thing should stop. Uncle Wale should also be thinking, what is our prospects in BRICS alliance? What is our prospects? We have heard that we have applied. All of these things, what is happening to the China currency swap? All of these rhetorics are positive. Those are the things that will start to stabilize the currency while we do the actual thing. We economists call it the purchasing power parity, but all those ones are English. The real thing is fundamentals we have to produce. We look at our balance sheet. How do we reduce exports? How do we increase exports, and reduce imports? I mean, we import crazy things into this country. How do we stop the leakages we have? How do we grow our foreign reserves? The oil production that we have, it has never gone beyond $1.5 million barrels.
Well, these won't be just questions. They are questions that we all must try to answer here. We'll come back and we'll talk more about production, which is one of the key concerns of many Nigerians. What are we producing to make the country better for us? So plenty more still to come here on Arise Primetime. Stay with us. Well, if you just joined us, you're welcome. You're watching Arise Prime Time, where we offer perspectives on the news and talking points of the day with Ms. Sulaiman Lede. Now, we have a whole lot to discuss, but again, the labor unions, many Nigerians like to call them organized labor, but there's no disorganized labor. Anyway, has knocked the federal government for releasing, well, what they call a 180 billion naira palliative package to states to cushion the impact of the petrol subsidy removal. The Nigeria Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress are insisting that the governors cannot be trusted, noting that politicians and not the poor will benefit from the 5 billion naira given to each state government for disbursement to citizens. We tried so much to reach out to the Labour Union leaders. That invitation is still out there. We're hoping that they will oblige that invitation to come speak to us and expatiate and expand more on what they think about this. I still have with me my guest in the studios, the policy strategist, political commentator, and group CEO of the Global Investment and Trade Company, Baba Yusuf, and also the political economist, Ijogi. It's our home stretch, gentlemen. Thank you very much. But quickly, let's jump in, and I want you to weigh in on that. I know you wanted to react to some of the key things before we went on break. Before we jump on the labor issues, I'll give you the time to respond to some of the key things Dakole spoke about.
Thank you very much. I would just like to draw the attention of federal and state governments to some key considerations while they are providing the solutions. First of all, up till date at federal and state level, and I think this will be good for the government. Nigerians want to see the level of seriousness with which the administration takes the cost of governance. We want to see quintessential leadership with regards to leading the way as far as the economic recovery is concerned. We want to hear clear statements from the federal and state government, and in action, cutting this excess fat and cutting the waste of governance, executive and legislature. I believe that is going to be one of the quick wins, if you agree with me, and a trust building, confidence building, strategy for the government to Nigerians, because Nigerians are still wondering why they are suffering this vagaries, and we still see in the disposition, in the actions, and even the mannerisms of the leaders that indeed we should take the brunt, and then while they continue, quote and unquote, balling, for want of a better word. So we want to see that in the next couple of days, so that people will really believe that that money is not available. Because it is the belief is that there's money available, but to some class of people at that leadership level, why we should continue to. Then secondly, from also a strategic perspective, we should know, Nigerians should know, and that the leaders should be reminded that we are already facing the potential huge food shortages due to global warming, due to insecurity, and due to the recent closure of our border with Niger, due to the Niger imbroglio and the potential military action. We already heard from Arewa Economic Forum crying out to say they are losing about 15 billion per week due to the closure of that border. Now, this is
weekly.
And this is adding another burden to an already, almost hopeless situation. So I wonder what is going on with that, because we need to have peripheral vision to these critical levers of our economy. You are talking about a section of the country with 1,600 kilometer border line with Niger. 7 states accounting for about 55 million Nigerians, which is almost close to 40% of Nigerians. Hugely agrarian, being part of the production powerhouse, talking about production, food production powerhouse, and other raw materials of byproducts of industry in this country, agriculture, is significantly impacted. We were expecting by now we see some strategy and sure-footedness with regards to turning around this situation so that farmers can go to farm and produce more food and raw materials. Recently, we saw what happened, the attack in Mina on the Nigerian army. So the potential consequences of losing this peripheral vision within the overall strategy moving forward of our economy, security is critical, foreign policy is critical, and then our posturing and body movements will also impact on us, whether we like it or not. So this should be considered in the overall strategy. Giving fertilizer, fantastic. How many of the people can go to the farm to actually, plant the fertilizers, for example? So these are the other issues that, and then at subnationals, to be honest, in this administration, I believe the state governments have more work to do than federal government. They need to create their own peculiar strategies in line with the peculiarities of their states. And I guarantee you, each state has the potential to create quick wins for their states if the governors are ready to think out of the box.
Well,
Absolutely.
That's a conditionality clause, and again, he also said that if they have the potential. Let me come here. Let's dig in deep into that concern by Labour, and it's almost the same concern shared by many Nigerians, issue of trust, and specifically, categorically, they say, we don't trust the governors.
And rightly so. Just because of how they have, most of the states are insolvent, they have mismanaged the resources that they have been had. They are not thinking out of the box. So in the popular parlance, they call it feeding bottle governors. They only share from the federation account. They don't generate anything by themselves. That is partly structural. It's a structural defective of our federation. You have someone who has a land and they say everything that under that land belongs to somebody else, the federal government, and you don't have access to it. So the structure, that one is structural defection. That's why some of us have been calling for the restructuring of the Nigerian system. But then the trust burden, I think I think that rather than Labour chastising state governments, they should help them ensure that these monies are actually spent for the purpose that which they are earmarked for.
So they can follow. They can follow the money.
Because Labour has all their workers across the state governments, the local governments. So what is Labour doing on national television and issuing press statements? They should ensure the members, the staff, civil service members that work in government are not members of Labour. You see, sometimes when I take this position, they say I am too harsh on the Labour, the organized, as you call them, organized Labour. If you put together the total number of civil service, federal civil service, state civil service, and local government workers in Nigeria, the total number of them, they are less than 10 million. Nigeria has a working population of over 110 million people who are willing and able to work. That is from the ages of 15 to 64. So what is Labour want to hold everybody to ransom for? I think they should be more strategic in their approach in engaging the state governments to ensure that these state governments actually distributes this money. They should come with suggestions to say, you know what, this 48% that is coming to each state out of the 5 billion, only remove that for grains. The remainder should be shared to local government. And they should ensure that this money hits the local government accounts. It shouldn't go to the, what's that thing called, the joint local government, that one that the state governors used to plunder the states. It shouldn't go into that account. It should go into the account, the individual local governments. And then the Labour should organize its members in the local government to ensure that the chairman of that local government distributes these resources. And I would like to say this again, that moving forward with this administration and for the opt-in time, economic thinking should drive political processes, not political processes driving economic thinking. It should be about the economy. It should be about the welfare of our people.
In other words, should they have waited for the inauguration of the cabinet on Monday before this meeting? Because time without number, you have mentioned Wale Edunwa as a fine head that can help drive this administration. Yes. But he's not in yet.
He's not in yet.
So should they have waited before this?
They should have. Because the government will be inaugurated on Monday. You now have ministers running the different agencies of government. So you should have waited. And then you hear the pronouncement of Wale Edunwa. He will now say, this is what we intend to do as a government.
Let me bring in Baba Yusuf. I want you to talk more on what Adakole has spoken, the government to government. Just recently, here on the Arise Prime Time, we spoke about grassroots governance. And he just said something about the grassroots government, which seemed to be absent in the entire scheme. How best can the states work with, even the federal government, work with the grassroots to ensure that these people are better and well identified, and to the extent that this palliative or succor or help gets to the needy?
It will be based on the genuineness of the leaders as subnationals, the governors, and the members of legislatures at the subnational. And I will still connect back to the National Assembly, because whether we like it or not, there's what I call permeation of intent and actions from the point of view of leadership. I believe there should be a lot more focus on the subnational in this administration going forward by all and sundry. The leadership also, by example, should start at the top. That being said, people went and campaigned and promised their people, premised on which they were voted into office, across party lines. We want to see the genuineness that will drive that. You see, it is that genuineness that will lead to commonality of purpose amongst these governors, that will make them to agree that we should have partnerships across states, and we can have partnership within the states, which will cascade to the local government, for example. But if the concept of leadership in Nigeria ab initio is go into the office first before you think of what to do, the overall concept of going to the office is parochial, is personal, rather than for the people. On paper, it could be for the people. And I'm saying this with all sorts of responsibility because we work with the evidence. We see the actions of the people will tell you at the leadership level. So the partnership can only work if that. I'll give you an example. We saw the road that failed between Gombe and Bauchi the other day, cutting off about 3 to 4 states. And to be honest, I was on the road 3 weeks ago with my business partner. We went to work for a client, and we had to take the road from Gombe to from Bauchi to Gombe to take a flight back to Abuja. And we were looking at this condition of the road, and I was aghast as to why these 2 governors couldn't sit down to work out modalities, government to government partnership, knowing that this road is a critical economic platform. This road is a critical security platform. This road is a critical social platform for not just for the 2 states, but as an economic gateway to the Northeast. To even say, call the other guys from the Northeast, sit down and find a way out, even if it is a federal road. How do we ensure this is done? It is when the road has failed that you see governors shouting that they have been calling PAMSEC for the past 4 days, nothing has done. I wonder the magic that could be done. Because of the lack of genuinity. That is why people cannot sit on the table to address issue that is a common denominator issue. So moving forward, we can only talk and call upon them, that is if they are even watching the TV, to listen to you to say, yes, we need to do this. But I believe also in this administration, we have seen some governors that have demonstrated, that authenticity and the willingness to work for their people. I hope that will, permeate into the other government, because there is this reality, what we are seeing and the potential. People are not going to sit down and continue taking in these hits, because according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the way we are with this 133 multidimensionally poor people, the only way they can continue to live is to push back. We look forward to a pushback that will be progressive, not to plunge us further into the abyss of backwardness. And to add value to the conversation about the labor, I call on the organized labor to please re-strategize. As times are changing, so should your strategies change. Your agitation strategy should change with the nuances of the people you are engaging. They are dynamic, you are not. The times have also changed. And to add value to that data, the Bureau for Public Service Reform actually told us the total number of civil servants in Nigeria, according to the Bureau for Public Service Reform last year, is less than 1 million. So if you add that number, since it is organized labor, they even also oversee the welfare and well-being of staff in the private sector. So you can inch further maybe towards the number that my colleague mentioned. But importantly, IMF has told us, data has shown us, Suleiman, 80% of Nigerians operate in the informal sector. And that is the sector that drives the economy. And that is within which people need interventions and succor. Procuring buses, to my mind, is just a procurement loophole for people. What happens to the Uber drivers, to the Okada riders, to the Keke Napes that are already organized? They have registers. Why don't you provide interventions to subsidize the transportation needs of these people in the informal sector and the organized labor to go to work, for example?
I'll tell you what, they already have unions. So
that's what I'm saying. They are already organized. So if you now say, rather than procuring these buses that 6 months later will break down, that will now be another platform to steal money, why don't you provide the money for the already existing players in that transportation sector that are also suffering the vagaries of the economy, for example?
It tells one thing, the attention must shift.
Absolutely.
To regional governments.
Absolutely.
Now, we're talking about the federal government, what the federal government has given to states. What have these states done so far in the last month? So speak to us on what we expect of the states. Now, let's run away from the laws, because I don't want you to go there, because it's not about everything underneath the earth. There's so much they can do, and you have to take charge. So what can the states do in the face of what we're dealing with at the moment?
Most subnationals should roll up their sleeves. First, I know that most of these states, especially around the Middle Belt, Northern Nigeria, their financials are very poor. That's why they need to roll up their sleeves. One, We cannot talk about increments in taxes because you cannot tax a dying economy.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking that they should just clean out the process. I can tell you for free that most of these governors, what they do with their internally generated revenue is for their pocket. They cook the books, they employ tax consultants and tax companies that collect on behalf of government or the state government. They give those contracts to their cronies. Just clean out the books and ensure that government increases its revenue. Secondly, like he pointed out, it should be about the people. It should be about the people. The people don't reside in the federal government. The federal government doesn't own land. The state governments own land. The people reside in the states. These state governments must begin to think on what they have as their own comparative advantage. If it is wheat, grow wheat. If it is corn, grow corn. If it is ICT, do ICT. If it is solid minerals, do solid minerals. We just must go into a partnership. Imagine a state like Nasarawa State goes into a partnership, or a state like Zamfara goes into a partnership with one of the largest gold producers in the world and say, look, we want only 13%. That's what the Constitution can give us. The federal government takes the rest. But we go into a tripartite partnership. You just need to ensure that you get revenues to build these roads that he's talking about, to build hospitals, to give certain, even though I don't like too much palliative, just create economic activities so that people can engage and grow the economy.
Really, what's the problem? What's the racket about, to the extent that private sectors, some of them flourish? For instance, let's look at some of the key things that have been taken over by the private sectors. They're doing well. And the next thing you hear is that government has no business.
No, that is
in business.
No, I completely disagree
so
with that.
If government has no business in business, do you want to also privatize governance? So
where is government going to get the resources from to do infrastructure?
So what exactly is wrong with?
Is the models that we operate.
The managers of states.
If you look at what's this? I keep missing this company, NNLG, Nigerian Liquefied Gas. Now, if you look at the business structure of that company, federal government owns 51%. 49% is, private sector driven. That company is the only company that we had before NNPC started that gives profits. Because it's run by the private sector. The federal government only has majority shares. So we can do that in different sources. Federal government get people to mine gold. Federal government get people to mine bauxite, get people to mine lithium. That's where government will get money from. And then the one that beats me when he's talking about low-hanging fruits or quick wins. I don't know why our oil production is still at 2,000 per barrel. Nigeria has a population of close to over 200 million people. And our production is just below 2,000. Saudi Arabia has a 10 million barrels per day production, and their population is less than 60 million. So I think that we really need to up our game to say, where is government going to get monies from? This idea of ways and means, what that the last administration
let me close. Sorry to cut you there because we're running out of time. Let me close with Baba Yusuf now. What exactly can the states? It's still about the states. It's still about honesty. It's still about trust. It's still about being purpose-driven to say, this is what I need to do for my people.
You've said it all, Suleiman. Every governor today, if you take a roll call of the governors of Nigeria, have been there, done that. They pay their dues as far as experience is concerned. None of them is a novice on issues of governance, on issues of business. The genuineness of the love for their people and fear of God is what will drive how they operate. They are not oblivious of this long grammar strategy we are talking about, by the way. But if you can get rid of vested interest and think of the future and think of your children and your great-grandchildren, the fact that we amass wealth by ourselves for our children is not a guarantee that they will actually make good use of it, or they will even get to use it anyway. We should go back to, referring to the models of our vanguards, the like of Abubakar Balewa, Ahmadu Bello, Awolowo. It is so sad that 60 years after independence, we are still making reference to those people as models. I want to see governors that want to leave track records that they will become icons in their society. However, each state in Nigeria does not have business being poor. And that's the fact.
I think it's a fine sound bite for us to leave it. No state in Nigeria has any reason whatsoever to be poor.
Absolutely.
Baba Yusuf Adakole Ijogi. It's a fine place to say many thanks for being such a nice company, and a fine one for us to wrap up the week.
Thank you.
Well, that's it on this week's edition. Do join us again next week. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, it's goodbye and thank you for watching.